Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is joining us now. Mr Shapps, a very good morning to you. All change again. However, France saying it's entering a fourth wave in the south of the country with emergency measures in place. How anxious are you about that?
Yeah, I mean, France are suffering from the Delta variant, which we've obviously been through, and they are now going through themselves. But, I'm very pleased that we've got a situation now where France is normalised in terms of being able to be treated like all other amber countries, meaning people can come back and they don't have to self-isolate. Having been to France, it's just the day two test that's still required and a test before they leave France.
How anxious are you about this fourth wave in France, though? They've put, as I said, emergency measures in place.
Yes, as I say, I think France and actually much of the continent are experiencing the same Delta wave that we went through, of course, and we know how this plays out. And the more vaccinated you are, the better off you are. And the French vaccination numbers, and indeed across Europe, have now started to sort of catch up with more people being vaccinated, more people will be protected. So, look, I think we'll always have to keep, I'm afraid, we'll always have to keep a close eye on this virus. But today is really good news with France opening up to people, several countries moving to the green list, and indeed countries coming off the red list, including India, Qatar, the UAE and Bahrain. So more travel during the summer, and these are the changes which exist, we hope, throughout August. So there aren't any changes next week or the week after. People, we hope, will enjoy their holidays.
You don't know that, though, do you, given what's happening in France and other parts of Europe, and given that we've scrapped the Amber Plus and this Amber Watch list, France and other countries could go straight back on the red list?
Well, look, I suppose with the virus, it's always the case that you have to be keeping a very close and vigilant eye out. I mean, we've known that the whole way through this, but we know a lot more about the virus now than we did, say, this time last year. Everyone has been offered a vaccine now, and that's obviously the big game changer. And throughout Europe and the rest of the world, the number of vaccines are catching up as well, all of which provides a sort of wall of protection. And look, we know that people look forward to save up for and want to go on holiday, plus other people who are travelling to see family and friends or just to do business. And we want to try and make it as straightforward as possible. And that's what the changes do as we gradually move from our domestic unlock to being able to internationally unlock as well.
So there's no chance of Spain, France going straight back onto the red list?
Well, I think you know that you can, with coronavirus, you can never say zero chance with coronavirus. But having said that, the levels of vaccination and what we now know about the virus and what our scientists have been able to work out in the last year means that people should be able to go away, enjoy their holidays without looking over their shoulders the whole time. And as I say, the next set of changes are not for another 3 weeks.
People thought that when they went to Portugal, though, didn't they? And then they had to rush back. And previously, August of last year, it was the same situation in France as well. But you're pretty confident that the countries like Spain, I'm choosing Spain and France because that's where most Brits go on holiday in Europe, are very unlikely to go back onto the red list this summer.
Well, look, I remember this well, not least because I put Spain on the off the travel corridor as it was at the time, and came home myself to start my self-isolation. So I understand the impact that this has on people. The big difference this year, the game changer, is vaccinations. And that means that...
Sorry, Transport Secretary, but we had the vaccinations with Portugal, didn't we? And that still moved very quickly. Not
really, and not to this extent. The difference now, of course, is that every person in the UK over 18 has been offered a vaccination. Vast proportion of the population, we're coming up to 90% of first vaccinations done, over 70% of second vaccinations. Vast portions of the population have got it here, but also, and importantly, also in these destination countries, particularly in Europe, who started off, if you recall, very slowly on the vaccination programme, but are now catching up. And that, again, means you've got protection both sides of that travel.
I want to know about your advice on these PCR tests that you need to take, that you're advised to take before you come back to the UK. They're not compulsory. So why would a family of 4 potentially spend an extra £600-700 when they don't need to?
So just to clarify, there's no change in terms of what's required. So we've always had quite a high specification. It's called sensitivity and specificity, it's called, for the tests that you have to do before you come to the UK. And that specification has not changed. In the case of Spain, where we have an interest in a variant called the B1621 variant, the reality is that 9 out of 10 people already take a PCR test, so there is actually no particular change. PCR tests are helpful because it will help our clinicians and our scientists work together to keep a very close eye on variants. And so it's just a reminder that those tests are particularly useful.
But if they're not compulsory, why should people invest in a PCR test rather than a lateral flow test?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's actually changed. We've always asked people to go and get a test.
The question remains the same, though, sir. Why would they?
Well, as I say, they've already actually been required to get a test of this particular, of a high sensitivity and specificity. That hasn't changed. It's just a reminder that the PCR ones, if you have the choice, if you're presented with both tests, the PCR ones are particularly useful. As I say, in Spain, it so happens that actually the PCR test is the go-to test. It gets quite technical, but it's quite unusual to find a lateral flow test which actually meets the requirements. It so happens the UK lateral flow tests are of high specification, but in most places, including Spain, people are already getting the appropriate type of test. We're just reminding people that helps our scientists to sequence the genome, which is the thing which enables us to know whether there are variants. So it's a useful addition.
Yeah, less than 3% of tests are actually used as far as the genome is concerned to find out what's going on with variants. But the NHS in this country use the lateral flow test, so surely that's good enough, isn't it?
So I think there you're referring to NHS workers who are taking lateral flow tests in order to be able to work. The specific issue here is when we're looking at people who've been abroad, we're actually interested particularly in variants of concern rather than just whether they have coronavirus. That's the thing we want to most track because we already have coronavirus here. What we're interested in is anything which we don't have here at number already. So that's why we require quite a high specification for that test. As I say, there's no actual change here. I've seen quite a lot of coverage about it this morning. There's no actual change here. We're just reminding people that a PCR test does enable our scientists to track any changes, and our clinicians and scientists are working with the Spanish authorities to make sure they keep a close eye.
If that is monitored and only on 3% of genome testing from the PCR tests are done at this stage is what we're being told. But I'm just clarifying for my viewers, they don't need to spend that extra 500 quid unless they absolutely want to, if they're a family of 4. Let me ask you about 12 to 15-year-olds being jabbed. When are we going to hear about that?
Well, we've always, as you know, we've got the joint Committee on Vaccines and Immunisations, the JCVI, and they're the ones right from the outset who approved the different ages, and we came down through the age categories, and they've now got down to saying 16 and 17-year-olds can and should be vaccinated, and they'll carry on looking at the data, and we'll have to wait for them to come back. So the simple answer to your question is we'll wait for the experts from the JCVI to tell us when it's safe and they feel appropriate to vaccinate people going down the age ranges.
I think your twins are about that age, aren't they? Would you be happy for them to be vaccinated?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, you know, they're very keen to be vaccinated as well. They're in that age group, the 16-17 age group, and it's amazing, particularly towards the end of term, how many of their friends had coronavirus and how much time that they had to spend off school at home because of needing, you know, bubbles being sent home and what have you. So they understand the disruption and the amount of their own lives and their own schooling that's been affected by this, and they're very, very keen.
And I'm at the other end of this spectrum. When can I expect to be able to have my booster jab?
Well, again, the JCVI will say more about this, but the expectation is that along with, you know, the annual flu jab, anyone over 50 would also most likely be asked to come forward for a sort of top up on the COVID jab as well. So that's the likely plan at the moment come the autumn. But again, we'll wait for the scientific experts to tell us exactly what they want us to do and when.
Why have you opened Dubai as part of the travel corridor? Is that pandering to the travel industry so that it can be used as a hub for the rest of the world to come into the UK?
No, I mean, with all these changes, I often see a sort of whole load of theories behind why a particular country's been opened or another one hasn't. But actually, with all these changes, what we do is ask the experts, that's the Joint Biosecurity Centre, the JBC in this case, to give us their overview of every country and their recommendation about where a country should sit. This time they've come back and they've said Dubai and Qatar, the UAE, and in fact India, which will surprise some people, are all fit to come from the red list and come onto the amber list, and it will be the usual combination of level of prevalence of coronavirus, the number of people who've had their injections already, how good the data is, how much sequencing goes on, so we can look for these variants. So it'll be the same factors as apply everywhere else.
Just before I let you go, a lot of holiday virtue signalling from your colleagues in Cabinet at the moment. Are you planning to stay in a yurt in Yorkshire this year, or are you going to holiday overseas?
No, we haven't yet had the discussion in the Shapps household. I was actually, like everybody else, waiting for this set of traffic light announcements before we had the discussion, because like everyone else, I was waiting to get the experts' advice as to where we can go. I suspect it might be a conversation in our household this coming weekend.
What's wrong with Yorkshire?
Nothing. Love Yorkshire. But where are you going?
Where am I going? I'm staying in the Cotswolds this summer. I was hoping to go to Africa, but you've left it on the red list, so I'm not.
Sorry about that.
Next year. Don't think you are, but thank you anyway. Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.